Thanks for watching today's main event featuring the Google Nexus 9 and the Apple iPad Air 2 and iPad Mini 3. It's been an incredibly exciting couple of days, with both Google and Apple announcing their tablet devices literally within 24 hours of one another. First up is the Google Nexus 9, manufactured by HTC. The Nexus 9 features an 8.9-inch LCD display with a resolution of 2048 by 1536, and unlike the tablets before it, it features a 4:3 aspect ratio versus a widescreen aspect ratio, which is very similar to what the iPads have been since the very beginning. Under the hood, it has a 64-bit 2.3 GHz dual-core processor with 2 GB of RAM. The internal capacity comes in either 16 or 32 gigabytes. It has an 8 megapixel rear camera and a 1.6 megapixel front camera. From a Wi-Fi perspective, it supports 802.11ac with MIMO and NFC and Bluetooth 4.1. The battery is a massive 6700 mAh battery, which Google says will last about 9 hours. As for Apple's offerings, they introduced the Apple iPad Air 2 and Apple iPad Mini 3, both of which have a resolution of 2048 by 1536, with the Air 2 being 9.7 inches and the Mini 3 being 7.9. The Apple iPad Air 2 uses Apple's next-generation A8X 64-bit chip, while the iPad Mini 3 uses the A7 chip, which is the same model as last year. Apple's never been one to release hard tech numbers, so until there's a teardown, we really won't know if the A7 truly is the exact same architecture as last year's, or if they made some subtle changes. And while both devices share the same 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera, the rear camera is an 8 megapixel on the Air 2 and a 5 megapixel on the Mini 3. And speaking of camera, at the announcement of the iPad, Apple spent a good bit of time on the camera on the iPads themselves. And much to the dismay of folks everywhere whose pet peeve is people taking pictures with their iPads, Apple made it a very strong point that the iPad was designed for photos and videos. A lot of people on the internet today have been roasting Apple for that. I think, however, that this was Apple's way to show video and photography professionals that the iPad is a tool to be taken seriously for editing, and not so much for them to use the iPad as their camera. All of the demos that Apple did for video and photography were done on an iPad Air 2. The iPad Mini didn't get much love this year, and it's not surprising considering that the specifications are exactly the same as last year, and I mean exactly. As you go down the list, there is word for word, side for side. They are identical. Upon examining the specs, literally the only difference that I could find was the fingerprint sensor. That's it. Considering that there weren't a lot of differences, it's no wonder that this was literally the only slide during the entire presentation for the iPad Mini. The rest of the comparisons that were done were based off of the Air 2. First of which was how thin the Air 2 was compared to everything else at 6.1 millimeters. A little bit thinner than the 7.95 millimeters of the Nexus. However, the Nexus does edge it out in terms of weight, being 0.03 pounds lighter. All in all, both devices look great, and I will be reviewing them as soon as they become available. The Nexus 9 starts at $399 for the 16 GB model and goes up to $32, while the iPad Air 2 starts at $499 for the 16 but then skips to 64 and 128, leaving out the 32 GB option this year, much like they did with the iPhone 6. The Mini 3 has the same storage options, but it starts at $399 instead. Keep in mind that these numbers were all based off of the Wi-Fi only model and not the carrier-branded cellular models. Stay tuned for an in-depth review of both of these devices to see which ones will be worthy of your holiday spending money. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.